Cool. So yeah, hi, I'm Pip, and I'm a designer at the Helix Centre. As Joshua said, it's kind of basically a design studio within Imperial College. So we kind of work with academics and the public and clinical staff as well to develop user-centered services and products, and also do a lot of public engagement. So which is essentially trying to get the public's voice heard within research. And over the last kind of couple of years, I've been part of trying to set up a program of work called Climate Cares, which I'm going to go into a bit more detail. And then we've got our kind of breakout room activity, which shares some of the activities we've been working on to try out in breakout rooms and get your feedback on. And hopefully you will take something away from it as well. So yeah, maybe just before we dig into kind of the logistical side of how Climate Cares works, I thought we'd just pop up a couple of questions just for you to kind of start reflecting on in your own mind before we kind of dive in. So yeah, like basically, how does the climate and ecological crises make you feel? And then also how you cope with these feelings. Because essentially these two questions is what kind of kickstarted the program of work called Climate Cares. Sorry. So yeah, so basically at the end of 2019, there was a small group of us across, all in different centres across Imperial, that basically asked ourselves those exact questions of, yeah, how did they make us feel and how do we cope with these quite intense feelings? So we have Dr. Emma Lawrence, who's kind of a researcher within the Institute of Global Health Innovation. Imperial, I'm a designer at the Helix Centre. And also Dr. Neil Jennings is a partnership development manager, so does a lot of work in policy and bridging that gap with communities for the Grantham Institute, which is kind of like the climate change institute within Imperial. So we kind of all met across an event and we're all having very, very similar kind of experiences and trying to answer those questions. And we all three of us kind of like dug a bit deeper into our own areas, I suppose. And what we found was actually between this overlap between mental health and climate change, there's quite a big gap in three main areas. So the first one is around research and the evidence base. So yeah, there was kind of a big gap with robust evidence to show this is an issue, especially for young people and people in the global south. And then there's also tends to be a bit of a gap with preventative interventions around how people cope with these feelings and how to help people kind of reflect and essentially build resilient communities within these two fields. And also policy change. There's a big lack of policy change and policy networking within this space. And just to bring to life, for example, with the research gap, some of the researchers did a kind of analysis around how many articles were published in PubMed and also in the New York Times within these two fields. And you can kind of see just how little attention, the kind of overlap, intersection between these two areas gets in both the research world and also in the media. And for us as a team, we kind of saw this as a bit of a missed opportunity because the two are really like intrinsically linked. So essentially like climate inaction has big hidden costs, but climate action has multiple benefits, like lots of co-benefits. For example, if you kind of help out in your local climate action initiative or within your community, if you do any sort of climate action, that's really beneficial for your mental health because it builds a sense of community and can really help you cope and process the feelings you're having. And also vice versa, like the better state of mind you're in means more likely the actions you take towards climate change are going to be much more impactful. So it's kind of looking at the link between your state of mind and the state of the world, and showing the value that each of those by linking the two can bring. So essentially that's a very short story about how the Climate Cares came to be. So we decided we needed a kind of interdisciplinary program of work across Imperial, and also lots of other partners across the globe that helps us essentially understand and transform mental health outcomes within these two crises of climate and ecological crises. And our vision is essentially to build like really resilient communities and really impact change in this area. And we have three main work streams that each myself, Emma and Neil lead. So the first one is about building rich evidence base. The second one is all about co-designing preventative interventions. And the third one, led by Neil, is around triggering global policy change. And there's a website and Twitter there if you're interested in understanding more later. And it's just been a really nice process as well, because it started from the three of us, and over the last kind of year and a half we've managed to grow the team. So yeah, we have a few kind of full-time staff within each area, and a great senior advisory group, and also an international advisory board that has really helped to build networks, especially in the policy space globally, which I'll chat more a bit about later. And so the first thing I wanted to share was just around the main output, I suppose, that we've had within the policy change streams. So this is a policy briefing paper all about the impact of climate change on mental health and emotional well-being, and essentially trying to pull together all the current evidence and also the implications for policy and practice. And this, there's a link to the paper which I can post in the chat later on as well. We'll send around afterwards if anyone's interested. But yeah, it has great graphics and just kind of brings together a lot of the evidence, and then suggests, depending on which field you're in, what you can do to shift policy. So for example, this is just one of the graphics that we created as part of that piece, where it kind of shows the impacts you have of climate change, which can be things like extreme weather events, and then trying to show the link between mental health impacts, and then also, because it's quite a kind of nuanced area between direct impacts of climate change, which actually has more evidence around, which I think in the global south people experience more, around like loss and damage of homes and properties, and issues with kind of like migration and extreme high temperatures, and then going all the way through to kind of the more indirect impacts that maybe we experience more in the UK, which is around actually just kind of like reading about these events, or and witnessing or learning about them indirectly, or maybe witnessing changes to homelands. So the paper kind of tries to kind of explore the differences between that, and how there's quite a big difference in how that impacts people's mental health. And also looking towards solutions, it tries to cover a lot around Cobenefits, which is a really key part of Neil's research, an area of expertise, which is around how essentially kind of showing the link between all these kind of interventions that we can do within the system. So for example, improving someone's energy can actually have a ricocheted effect around how often the child in that household goes to school, or how often the person goes to work, because of the health benefits of that. So yeah, this is a graphic trying to just communicate all the different co-benefits that can exist within climate change and mental health kind of action, I suppose. So yeah, we have energy, increasing blue and green spaces, really amazing for mental health, which is within communities, and the biodiversity. Again, climate action, which I mentioned earlier, how it really helps to build social connection and sense of agency, and even things like cycling and walking can really have a lot of physical health benefits. So that was the kind of what I wanted to share about around the policy side of things. And in terms of the research, we've got a few different studies going on at the moment, but one of the main ones is all about essentially looking at young people, so 16 to 24-year-olds, starting within the UK. So we essentially did a survey that reached 500 young people in the UK, and asked them questions around their psychological responses to climate change and also COVID, and also looked into their kind of sense of agency, looking at the world they hope to see, what are their fears and hopes for the future, and looking at how they cope with these emotions as well and psychological reactions. And yeah, that gave us lots of really, really rich data that they've kind of like analyzed and come up with some really interesting results that's currently getting published. So I can't share that with you yet, but it will be coming out soon. And what's amazing about this study as well, and what's really helped with the advisory board network, is we're now kind of scaling that survey across the Philippines, India, Caribbean, and USA, hopefully Canada or Australia as well. So essentially we can get this really huge database of lots of different communities across the globe and kind of compare how they're kind of responding to these crises and how they're building up resilience. And then once we have that, it means any intervention that each of these communities kind of implement, it means there's a system in place to monitor their change, essentially, and hopefully that can then feed back into policy as well. There's a really good evidence base for what's working and what's not, and what people need as well. So that's the main research study that we have going on at the moment. And this study has kind of got two approaches to it. So the first is this survey, online international survey. And the second part of that, almost to try and test a different approach to research, is a guided journal that I'm kind of leading on at the moment. So essentially, it's a really fairly low risk and very low cost intervention. Again, targeted the same audience as the survey, so young people at the moment across the UK. And it's trying to give them a different approach to kind of processing how they feel about climate and ecological crises, and also guide them through more of a process of like processing those feelings and steering them up towards action. And I suppose the unique aspect of this part of the study is the fact that it's an intervention, but it's also a research tool as well. So basically all the really rich data that we're going to gather through this process, we're going to feed that back into the research stream, and they're going to do a big analysis on the difference, I suppose, between really rich qualitative data compared to kind of a survey quantitative approach. And we're collaborating with a really amazing organization called Force of Nature, if anyone's heard of that before. But yeah, they're a youth-led climate kind of activism group, and it's led by a woman called Clover Hogan, who's amazing, got a really great TED talk as well, all around this area, which I can share as well later on if people are interested. But yeah, we're collaborating on them to kind of use their network and work with their network to reach 200 young people across the UK and test different formats. So we're going to have people that just have the journal one-off, going to have workshops with some people so they're supported by a community, and kind of compare how those different styles of interventions work for people. And the plan is hopefully to kind of scale, once we've done the UK, follow a similar path of what the survey is doing as well, so reach those networks, and evolve and iterate the intervention. So yeah, it kind of came from, initially we did a few really small scale public engagements at a few events in kind of the end of 2019, where we just asked the public similar questions around how they feel and what hopes and fears do they have for the future. And this theme kept on coming up over and over again, which is around feeling powerless, especially within young people, because they kind of lack this sense of agency and action when it comes to climate. So yeah, here are just a couple of quotes from some of those engagements that we did around how you kind of see it on the news, but then all of a sudden you just have to go to like quote unquote normal life. And this was also before COVID as well. So yeah, it would be interesting to see what kind of insights would come up from an engagement like that now. So that was kind of the big insight that we had from that piece of work. And just if it's helpful as well, here are some common kind of environmental climate psychological reactions that are kind of, I suppose, quite well defined in the literature right now. So you have kind of eco-anxiety, which different people have different definitions of, but it's around this chronic fear of the future, of environmental doom, eco-phobia, which is this feeling of powerlessness, which is what our kind of initial engagements in research kind of highlighted. Then you have climate grief, which is a feeling of sense of loss caused by climate and ecological crises, and solastalgia, which is a kind of similar to like homesickness, but you don't actually leave your home has changed. That's another one that's come about in the last couple of years. And I think for this study, so essentially we're trying to take people and young people from a place of kind of lack of awareness, mental ill health, the feeling of being stuck in your emotions, lacking a vision of the future, this feeling of powerlessness, disconnected and overwhelmed, and kind of take them on a bit of a journey and support them to shift towards self-awareness, mental well-being, emotional agility, around being able to navigate all these different emotions and respond in a kind of healthy way, help them to discover their own vision of a better world, empower them, give them a sense of responsibility, and also help people focus, because I think that's a big issue, is when problems feel so big and overwhelming, it's quite hard to know how to focus your efforts and energy. And alongside all this kind of gathering of insights, we read a book around by Elizabeth Lesser, who wrote a book called Cassandra Speaks, which I really recommend. And essentially, she talks about this concept, which I just really like, it resonated with the team, around Innovism versus activism. And she kind of describes Innovism as the realization that healing the self and healing the world go hand in hand. And I think often, especially in climate activism, this is sometimes an aspect that gets a bit forgotten about. There's loads of focus on like acting and doing, but not so much focus on reflection and kind of healing parts of yourself, which again goes back to my initial kind of diagram at the beginning around how the state of the world and the state of your mind are really, really intrinsically linked. So yes, that was another big insight that kind of informed this bit of this kind of design and intervention. And I suppose having a lack of innovism or self-reflection can lead to a sense of burnout or stress. Sometimes it can lead to a bit of a hero complex, where if you kind of don't check yourself, doing all these good things for the world can sometimes get to people's heads a little bit. And also unintended consequences, because if you're not like kind of reflecting and being strategic about the decisions you make, and you're just focusing on actions, sometimes we make mistakes that aren't intended. So there's lots of benefits to Innovism, I suppose. And and also I suppose I find it helpful to kind of define as well what self-reflection is, because that's kind of the key to Innovism. So it's this idea of self-awareness, which is allowing us to look neutrally at our thoughts, feelings, emotions, and actions. And also having this really big sense of curiosity. So kind of switching from a victim mindset to like a curious and growth mindset of seeing everything that happens to you as an opportunity to grow and evolve. And I suppose a slight kind of red flag is sometimes self-reflection can become a bit obsessive. So I think it is about balancing that self-reflection practice. So yeah, just to kind of flag that it needs a bit of balance sometimes, because especially when I first discovered the tool, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing, and maybe spent too much time in that reflective state. But yeah, has huge amounts of benefits on an individual level, and also to like on a more system level. So it improves social life and your work life, greater clarity of thoughts, knowing values, I think is a really important part of the process, discovering who you are and what values you kind of stem from and want to act upon. And then improved decision making. It's been linked with less stress and anxiety, and also even things like better sleep. So lots of benefits for people. So essentially we started this process by kind of mapping what are all the different ways to self-reflect. So we've got things like expressive writing, which is just writing without any sort of thought process. You kind of just like get it out on the page. There's guided journaling, which is like lots of activities and kind of hand holding while journaling. There's things like meditation, breathing exercises, walking in nature. Some people like to talk to themselves, maybe things doing voice notes even as ways of journaling and recording. A reading even helps people to self-reflect. Yoga, kind of like mindfully moving the body, and also even just something as simple as just tracking emotions really helps with kind of emotional agility as well. However, we've kind of thought the best opportunity to focus on for our project and the skill sets where we could bring would be this guided journaling approach. So that's kind of how the project came to be. And we got a small pot of funding and basically designed the whole journal with a group of 10 young people across the UK who have been amazing and really actively involved in both the journal and the survey. And yeah, did a series of probably about 6 workshops where we kind of plucked apart how they were feeling and kind of channeled that into a structure that we thought would be really nice to take young people through. And yeah, so this is a high level of the structure. So to begin with, we ask people to understand how they feel. Then we kind of, once they've kind of got a good understanding of their psychological response to climate change and ecological crises, we then ask them to kind of then put together coping strategies essentially. So what does taking care of yourself look like? So that's week 2. Then week 3 is about envisioning a better world. So then that's a big barrier for a lot of people, young people, because if you can't kind of like see the world you want to see, you can't work towards that. You kind of get stuck a bit in that doom and gloom stage. So yeah, really helping people to use their imagination and creativity to paint that picture of a better world. And then week 4 is all about claiming calling. So understanding your passion and skill set, and again, focusing your energy on what makes sense for that individual. And each week is made up of 5 daily check-ins, which is essentially a big emoji wheel, which we're going to do in breakout rooms in a bit. There's 5 different activities within each week as well, and there's 5 kind of free-form expressive writing and quotes and resources. So there's a space for them to just express however they want as well. So trying to test a few different methods within this journal. So today we've basically adapted we've taken an exercise from each week of the journal and adapted it for you guys today. So I'll open the Miro board in a second, but essentially the 4 questions we're going to explore in breakout rooms is the first one is, how does climate change make you feel? Using an emoji wheel. The second is about exploring different coping strategies that work for you. The third is around kind of envisioning what a day in the life of your dream world looks like. And the fourth, is about finding your purpose and focus area using a Japanese framework called Ikigai, if anyone's heard of it. So I might just, maybe Joshua, I don't know if you can pop the Miro board link in the chat. That would be amazing. But I'll just show you. Yeah, maybe some people are already in it now, but if yeah, I'm not sure if everyone's used Miro before or not, but I'll just maybe give an overview of it before we go into breakout rooms, and feel free to shout out if you've got any questions. Essentially, kind of, it's like a big kind of collaborative space where a good tool is just learning how to zoom in and out, so you can use your scroller or your trackpad or mouse in the normal ways you would zoom in and out, or there's this kind of like little thing in the right hand corner that helps you navigate the board. And I've just popped a warm-up area where people can just try out drawing a shape or making a post-it, just so you can learn how to use it. A really good tip is just to hide the cursors. So if this little button, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but at the top, if you click that, it'll just remove everyone's cursors, which can sometimes get a little bit distracting. So yeah, if you want to draw a shape or make a post-it and tell us about your favorite plant or animal, just gotta get used to the board first. Check everyone can is comfortable using it. Nice worms. Don't often get that one. Fabulous. Cool. While you're all doing that, I might just give a bit of an overview of the 4 exercises, and then we can jump into breakout rooms. And hopefully they're all really self-explanatory, so you all will manage, I'm sure, and hopefully find them valuable. So yeah, we've got a kind of four different worksheets per breakout room. And so, for example, the first one, which is taken from the first week of the journal, is all about how you feel in crisis. Essentially, yeah, how you feel about climate change or ecological crisis. And what you do here is just like take a circle or draw a circle over your kind of top emotions that come up. And you can write your own as well if there's not any, if some of them aren't put on here already. And just kind of like have a little discussion between yourselves in your breakout rooms, spend about 5 minutes on that. Then we're going to move over to coping strategies. So basically thinking about which activities are good at calming you down when you feel stressed or exhausted. And we've got some suggestions here, which you can kind of like drag over into your box. So you get a box each, or again, you can kind of write your own if you have any other ones that aren't listed there. Then we're going to do a bit of an imagination exercise, which is like, what does a day in the life of your dream world look like? So this is all about imagining you wake up in 2050 in the world of your dreams, kind of have a bit of a conversation of what that day looks like. So what do you see outside when you wake up? Who do you live with? What do you have for breakfast? What are the news headlines, which I think is always an interesting exercise. How are communities connected? And a really good one to think about as well is like what big environmentally related problem you would like to be solved, because I think that'll really help in the final exercise, which is using the Ikigai framework. And so this basically asks each person 4 questions, and about their kind of, the theory is if you balance these 4 questions, that's how you kind of find your calling and passion in life. So it's yeah, looking at what you're really skilled at, what you can be paid for, what does the planet need, and what are your passions. And hopefully this exercise, especially within the study and with young people, we're trying to help people understand that there's climate, I suppose, quote unquote, activism comes in many different shapes and forms, and it's not just about like, yeah, getting on the streets. There's lots and lots of different ways, as I'm sure you all know already in the tech industry, that you can help and contribute. So yeah, they're the 4 exercises, and yeah, see how you get on. And also any feedback as well on these exercises would be amazing, because we're about to start testing them with young people as well. So it'd be awesome to hear your thoughts on how the session goes.